Hello, I'm Lena. And my sister told me we were going to the cabin to talk about Grandpa's will. Just us, like old times, she said. But instead of a conversation, I got chamomile tea laced with something bitter. Woke up tied to a tree. Wrists bleeding. 72 hours alone. No phone. No way out. Why? So she could take the $950,000 our grandfather left me and erase me from the family. Like I never existed. Have you ever been so betrayed by someone you loved? You didn't even recognize their voice anymore? That's what happened to me. And what I did next wasn't about revenge. It was about telling the truth out loud, for the first time. What would you do if your family decided you were disposable? I'm glad you're still part of the family, Malis whispered, her arms tightening around me in a way that felt just a little too firm, a little too final. I smiled because that's what you do. You smile when you're not sure if you're being welcomed or warned. I'd arrived in Bozeman earlier that afternoon, my first time back in nearly a year. The air smelled like dust and lilacs, Montana in early summer. As the rental car rolled past the edge of town, I spotted the same broken white fence outside the diner where Grandpa used to get coffee at 6 a.m. Sharp. Time hadn't touched it. Or maybe it just refused to be changed, the same way old wounds never really close, they just harden over. Corvina, my mother, opened the door to the house before I even knocked. She looked the same. Sharp bun, apron still tied like she had something simmering, even though it was obvious she hadn't cooked in years. "Well, you made it," she said, stepping aside. No hug, no warmth, just a nod, as if I'd shown up late for a dentist appointment. The living room hadn't changed. Same brown recliner Grandpa always used, even though the cushion was deflated and the fabric faded. My eyes locked onto a photo over the fireplace, one of the last taken of him, standing next to me on the front porch. I looked happy in that photo. I don't remember feeling that way. Malis walked in from the kitchen, all smiles and polished charm. Her hair was curled, makeup perfect, blouse neatly tucked. She looked like someone who'd just come from hosting a lifestyle segment on local TV. "I made pot roast," she beamed, arms out, "just like Grandpa liked it." I let her hug me. The roast did smell like home, carrots, onions, thyme. I hated that it made my eyes sting. I didn't know whether it was the smell, the memory, or the fact that no one else had mentioned him since I walked in. We sat down around the old oak table, just the three of us. Jorah and Valora were on their way, Corvina said, waving it off like they were just running late and not avoiding me. The food was good, too good, the kind of good that makes you nervous. No one says what they really think when their mouths are full. "So," Malis began, eyes locked on me, "I thought it'd be nice for the family to have a little private gathering next weekend. At the cabin." I blinked. "The cabin? Grandpa's cabin?" "Just us," she nodded. "The core. Like it used to be." Corvina chimed in. "We need to handle the estate in a respectful, unified way. I assume you agree." I hesitated. Something about the way they were both looking at me, too calm, too coordinated, made me want to grab my keys and drive straight back to the airport. Still, I heard myself say, "Sure. Okay." "That's wonderful." Malis smiled again, but this time, her smile didn't reach her eyes. "We'll hash things out. No lawyers, just family." That word again, family. It hung in the air like smoke. I swallowed the rest of my wine. The next morning, the lawyer came. Thatcher looked like he'd stepped out of 1965. Brown corduroy suit, wire-rimmed glasses, a thin leather briefcase that creaked when he opened it. He stood in front of the fireplace like it was a pulpit. "I'm here to execute the wishes of the late Mr. Gideon Parks," he began. "As expressed in his most recent will, dated October 3rd of last year." I glanced at Corvina, who sat stiffly in her chair, hands folded like she was preparing for a funeral mass. Malis sipped her coffee, one eyebrow slightly arched. Thatcher read slowly, his voice thick with formality. Grandpa had left a few modest items to local charities, a vintage typewriter to the Historical Society, his fishing gear to the VFW Lodge. Then came the line that changed everything. To my granddaughter, Lunell Parks, I leave all property, financial accounts, and personal investments, totaling approximately $950,000. She alone shall inherit my estate, for reasons she understands better than anyone. The room went silent. Not awkward silent. Nuclear silent. Melis stopped breathing. Corvina stared at me as though I'd just confessed to a crime. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but all that came out was air. Thatcher continued, unbothered. This decision is final and binding. The documents have been notarized and filed accordingly. When he left, no one spoke for a full minute. Finally, Melis stood up. Well, she said, tone brittle. That's a surprise. I didn't know, I said quickly. I had no idea he… Corvina interrupted, sharp as a blade. Don't pretend you didn't influence him. He always had a soft spot for you. I looked at her, stunned. He was fair to everyone. She shook her head. You were his little shadow. You know how impressionable he was in his final months. I wanted to argue, but the guilt curled around my ribs like barbed wire. Maybe I should have told him not to. Maybe I should offer to split it. I'm not trying to take… Melis held up a hand. It's fine, Lena. Really. It's just money. Her voice was too even, too calm. That night, I stood in the hallway outside the guest room, listening to faint whispers behind Melis's door. Corvina's voice, hushed but sharp. Something about not what we planned. I didn't sleep. The next day, I packed my bag. I decided not to go to the cabin after all. It felt wrong. Off. I was halfway down the stairs when Melis appeared at the door, blocking my exit. I know this is weird, she said, but the cabin, it's important. Grandpa would want us to do this together. I hesitated. She stepped closer. We don't have to talk about the will. It's just a weekend. Some closure. Please. I don't know what made me say yes. Guilt? Fear of being seen as selfish? The faint hope that this was all just a misunderstanding. Maybe I still believed there was something worth saving. She hugged me again, tighter this time. I'm glad you're still part of the family, she whispered. But the way her arms held me said otherwise. I didn't answer her. I just nodded, because there wasn't much left to say. That hug lingered longer than it needed to, and the pressure of her hands on my back wasn't reassuring. It was conclusive, like she'd already made a decision for both of us. 2 days later, Melis pulled up in a black SUV with tinted windows and way too much attitude for a family weekend. I stepped out of my apartment with a backpack and an old denim jacket I hadn't worn since college. Bozeman was warming up, but I felt cold. Hop in, she chirped, like we were headed to brunch instead of a remote cabin in the woods where Grandpa used to make us dig our own latrine holes for character. The back seat wasn't empty. Valora sat by the window, long manicured nails, scrolling her phone with one hand and sipping something iced with the other. Jorah was in the passenger seat, arms crossed like a bouncer in an off-duty mood. I slid in between them without speaking. The doors locked as soon as they shut. Automatic. Still, it felt symbolic. The ride started in silence, broken only by the hum of tires on asphalt and a faint playlist of soft jazz. Melis insisted on looping through the car's Bluetooth. I tried not to notice that Corvina wasn't in the car. I'd assumed she'd come too. Mom's already at the cabin, Melis offered casually, like she'd read my mind. She took the truck up earlier, wanted to set up, make sure the propane was working and all that. Valora giggled. I told her she's not exactly the camping type anymore, but she insisted. I glanced out the window as we passed the outskirts of town. Familiar trees blurred into one another, and I realized I hadn't been to the cabin since high school. Grandpa used to make a big deal out of it. No phones, no distractions, just nature and each other. I remember loving it. Back then, Melis kept making eye contact in the rearview mirror, not checking the road, checking me. I leaned away. As we hit gravel and the signal bars dropped off my phone screen one by one, I felt that low-level anxiety I'd carried for years tighten its grip. I kept quiet as we arrived. The cabin looked smaller than I remembered, but not in a warm, nostalgic way. more like a house abandoned by meaning. The rocking chair out front was missing one slat. The wind chime was tangled in itself, silent. Corvina emerged from the porch with a half-hearted wave. "We've got water and snacks inside. I thought we'd all settle in before talking." Her voice was hollow, and her eyes wouldn't meet mine. We unloaded groceries. I took the first bag, lighter than it looked, and noticed something at the bottom. Rope. Coiled. Thick. "Why'd we bring rope?" I asked, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. Malis answered without hesitation. "There's a loose shutter on the upstairs window. Thought we'd fix it this time." Valora chimed in. "Plus, classic cabin weekend. You always need rope." For something. It was a weird joke. I didn't laugh. I put the bag down, moved to the kitchen, and started putting away cans. Everything was labeled. Someone had planned this. I opened the fridge and saw 3 identical bottles of chamomile iced tea, each with a neat label. For peace. The air felt heavy. My shoulders tightened as Malis walked in with a mug and handed it to me. "Drink something," she said gently. "You look pale." "Chamomile?" I asked. "Grandpa's favorite," she replied, like that answered any of the questions bubbling just below my skin. I took the mug. The scent hit me first. It smelled like the summer I was 10 and scraped my knee so bad Grandpa carried me all the way to the cabin and made me laugh with ghost stories. But there was something else, a faint bitterness that didn't belong. I glanced up. Malis was watching me, her expression unreadable. I didn't sip right away, just held it. "I'll take it to the porch," I said. "I need some air." "No problem," she said quickly, too quickly. "Just don't spill it. That's a new mug." I stepped outside, cradling the warmth in my hands. I took a single sip, then another. Then, everything shifted. The world moved, but not with me. Trees tilted, the wind stung. My grip loosened, and the mug shattered on the steps. I tried to stand, but my legs gave out. My mouth felt stuffed with cotton. The last thing I remember clearly was the rocking chair creaking, even though no one was in it. When I woke, the sky was burning pink. It was dusk, cold and quiet, and I couldn't move my arms. I was upright, my back pressed against bark, rough, old, splintered bark. My wrists were tied behind the tree. I tested the knots, tight, brutal, designed to hold. My ankles were bound too, zip ties digging into skin. I opened my mouth to scream, but my voice cracked. My throat was dry, so dry it felt like sandpaper. 50 feet ahead, I saw the outline of the cabin, lit softly from inside. I heard the clink of dishes, laughter. Someone turned on music. I couldn't make out the song, but it was upbeat, wrong for the setting. I wasn't supposed to be part of this party. I shifted my weight, pain flaring in my hips and shoulders. I'd been sitting there a while. A flashlight beam bobbed in the distance. Then footsteps. Malis. She came alone, holding a bottle of water. She knelt just close enough for me to see the smug curve of her lips. "I told you we needed to talk," she said, setting the water down just beyond my reach. "But you wouldn't listen." I croaked something, barely a word. She leaned closer. "You'll live, that's the point. We're not monsters. We just needed time to think. Time for you to think." I shook my head slowly, dizziness threatening to tip me sideways. What are you doing?" "What Grandpa should have done years ago," she snapped. "You think he didn't see through you? You think he wasn't manipulated? You always played the victim." I wanted to scream, to call her out, to fight, but I couldn't even lift my head. "You're not dying out here, Lena," she added, rising. "You're learning." She turned and walked away. I sat there as the light faded, as mosquitoes found me, as my stomach clenched in on itself. The stars blinked to life, one by one. The wind chilled. And that was the moment I stopped hoping to be loved and started planning to survive. A single mosquito buzzed past my ear, loud enough to jolt me from the fog I'd slipped into. My eyes opened slowly. My head throbbed. Everything was sore. Neck, shoulders, wrists, even the arches of my feet. I could feel the crust of dried sweat and dirt on my skin, a grimy second layer that stuck like shame. The air had changed. Cooler now, damp with morning. The smell of wet leaves and something sour clung to the air like mold. I could hear birds chirping faintly, far away. That meant I hadn't died. Not yet. I turned my head to the side, just enough to let my cheek rest against the bark behind me. Something sharp pricked the edge of my jaw, but I didn't flinch. Pain made sense. Everything else didn't. A memory came uninvited. Grandpa's voice, low and steady, as he taught me how to tie a figure-8 knot. I was 9. We were sitting right here, behind the cabin, using sticks and paracord like it was the most important lesson in the world. Your strength won't always come from here, he'd said, tapping my arm. It comes from here. He touched his temple gently. Anyone can scream. Not everyone can think. That memory didn't feel sweet now. It felt like fuel. I shifted slightly, testing the rope at my wrists. Still tight, but not impossible. I tried to bend my thumb inward, just enough to wiggle movement through the pain. A few seconds passed before a dull crack sounded from my left hand. It didn't feel like damage. It felt like hope. Footsteps crunched in the distance. I froze, ears straining. Then I saw her. Malis, wearing sunglasses, coffee in one hand, something small and velvet in the other. She moved like she was walking into a conference, not up to someone she'd left tied to a tree overnight. "Good morning, sunshine," she said, stopping a few feet in front of me. "You look rough." I didn't answer. She tossed the velvet pouch toward my feet. "Thought you'd want this back." I stared at the small bag lying near my sneakers. My hands twitched behind me, still bound, still useless. "Remember this?" she asked. "Your big 16th birthday. Grandpa made a big speech about how you were the light of his life, gave you this bracelet like you were the heir to something important." My eyes stayed on her. She stepped closer, leaned down, and unzipped the pouch slowly. Dramatic. Always was. Inside was a silver bracelet, twisted rope design, identical to the one Grandpa gave me, only it wasn't mine. "That's not it," I said, voice raspy. "Oh, sweetheart." Her smile went tight. "He gave me the real one last spring. Said he regretted making you think you were so special. You just made him feel guilty. It was pity, Lena. All of it." She zipped the pouch shut and dropped it again. "Anyway, thought you'd like a memento. Family's important, right?" Then she turned and walked off without another word. That moment, more than the ropes, more than the bugs or the hunger or the cold, that was the moment that broke something inside me. Not because of the bracelet, not even because of the lie, but because she believed it. I sat there for hours. The sun rose higher, shadows shifted, heat returned. I watched ants crawl near my shoes. A fly landed on my lip. I didn't even try to swat it, but eventually, I noticed something. A small, rusted nail sticking out of the bark behind me. Not much, barely longer than a paperclip, but enough. I remembered another lesson from Grandpa, a trick for getting out of bad knots. Don't yank, shift. Friction helps you, not brute force. I began working the rope against the nail, back and forth, inch by inch. It didn't feel like progress. It felt like insanity. My wrists bled, my shoulders screamed. But the rope frayed, tiny strands at first, then more. I lost track of time. Maybe an hour, maybe 5. Eventually, my left hand came free. The shock of it made me laugh. One short, bitter laugh that echoed too loud. I pulled my right wrist loose, then crawled forward, biting through the zip tie at my ankles with cracked teeth and pure will. By the time I stood upright, the sky had turned that strange orange-gray of early evening. My legs barely held me, my arms shook, but I was standing. That alone felt like a revolution. I didn't run. I walked. Slowly, carefully, every step deliberate. I stayed behind the trees, keeping the cabin in sight, but far enough to stay invisible. They were inside, drinking, probably eating, probably still telling themselves this was justified. A lesson, a correction. Jorah was passed out on the porch swing. Valora was pacing with her phone, talking to someone I couldn't hear. "She's out of the way," she said. "We've got the weekend to get it settled." Inside, I could see the table set, candles, wine, mismatched plates, like a dinner party, like nothing had happened. I ducked around the back, slipping into the small shed where Grandpa used to keep our hiking gear. Everything smelled like mold and old leather. I grabbed my dusty pack, still had my name tag stitched to the side. Lena, all caps. It felt like seeing myself again for the first time. I filled the side pocket with matches, jerky, a half-empty bottle of water. Then I left, not to escape, but to plan. They thought tying me up would make me weak. Instead, they gave me something better. Time to remember who I really am. I moved like smoke through the trees, circling back toward the cabin after darkness fell. I wasn't running anymore. I was hunting. Every step hurt, but the pain kept me sharp. It was late, past midnight. I could tell from the way the sky pressed black against the tops of the pines and how the porch light on the cabin had already burned out. They were either asleep or drunk enough not to notice creaking floorboards. That was my chance. The cabin looked different now. It wasn't the place of childhood summers and bonfires. It was a trap disguised as a home. The rocking chair out front didn't creak with welcome. It leaned forward like it wanted to watch me fall. I stood still for a long time, heart hammering, waiting for any sign of movement inside. Nothing. Just muffled snores and the faint thump of someone's phone still playing music too low for lyrics to carry. I crept around the back. The kitchen window glowed faintly. Inside, dishes lay in the sink, wine glasses half full. They hadn't even bothered to clean up. Jorah's boots were by the door, mud dried on the soles. Valora's scarf was draped over a chair. Every item screamed arrogance, the confidence of people who thought I had no way out. The back door creaked but didn't wake them. I slid inside, holding my breath. The air was thick with wine, dust, and betrayal. Each step on the wooden planks felt like a confession, but I kept going. I found myself in the hallway, the one that used to lead to my room. Against every instinct, I opened the door. My old bedroom. Nothing had moved. The quilt my grandmother stitched was still on the bed, faded now, untouched. My books lined the shelf, their spines swollen from damp air. It looked like a shrine to the girl I used to be, before greed and jealousy twisted my family into strangers. But this wasn't about nostalgia. This was about evidence. I crept further into the master bedroom, where Malis had dumped her bags. She never locked things as a kid, but I knew her too well. She'd learned to cover her tracks as she grew more manipulative. I checked her suitcase first, neatly packed, clothes folded, cosmetics arranged like a department store display. Then I found it. A drawer in the corner, locked with a flimsy latch. It didn't take long. A hairpin from my pocket worked like a charm. The latch popped, and there it was. A thick binder, navy blue, labeled in her handwriting. Legacy Strategy, Contingency Plan. My chest tightened as I opened it, each page cut like a blade. The first section, Lena's likely reactions. My name in bold. Underneath, bullet points. Stage 1, denial. Stage 2, guilt. Stage 3, collapse. The next section held a chart. A timeline from Friday afternoon, tea time, dosage administered, to Sunday evening, subject compliant. Subject, that's what I was to her. Not sister, not family. A subject. And then the part that nearly made me laugh, even as rage boiled under my skin. Contingency notes for involving authorities. It read, if Lena contacts police, deny substance use. Frame as emotional breakdown. Redirect narrative to her being unstable. They hadn't reacted out of anger. They hadn't slipped in the heat of grief. They planned this. Each cruel move was rehearsed. I snapped photo after photo with my phone, fingers trembling but steady enough to capture every word. I slid the binder back exactly as I'd found it. Then I turned to the hallway. The landline hung on the wall near the kitchen. A relic Grandpa refused to throw out. It should have been my lifeline. I lifted the receiver with shaking hands and dialed 3 numbers. 911, what's your emergency? The voice was calm, professional, and horribly familiar. Hello? I croaked. This is Lena Parks. I've been drugged, tied up, The voice cut me off. Nobody's coming, sis. You were always too trusting. Silence. Then the click of a line going dead. I stood frozen, staring at the receiver in my hand. My sister had rerouted the cabin line. She hadn't just trapped me physically, she'd stripped me of any illusion of safety. Even my last desperate act was accounted for. I placed the phone back on the hook gently, quietly. My stomach twisted. I wanted to scream, but screaming would have given her the satisfaction of being right, that I'd collapse, that I'd break. Not this time. I slipped back out into the night, binder photos stored in my phone, fury burning like a furnace inside me. I needed to protect the evidence. I wrapped the phone and the photos in a piece of plastic I found in the shed, tucked it under a log at the edge of the woods where only I would know to look. But I couldn't leave without one last move. Back inside, in front of the stone fireplace, I found a scrap of wood and carved into it with a dull knife I found on the mantel. Words simple enough, but sharp as any blade. You taught me how to disappear. Now watch me show up where it matters. I set the wood where they'd see it. Right by the ashes of old fires, where Grandpa once told stories about loyalty and love, and I walked back into the dark. I wasn't running anymore. I was circling back, with fire. By the time I got back to town, the sun had barely broken over the peaks. Bozeman felt indifferent to my re-entry, like the place itself had no idea what I had just crawled out of. Which made sense. The world doesn't pause when you're betrayed. It just keeps spinning like nothing happened. I didn't go home. I couldn't. My apartment felt too small, too quiet, and too clean for the kind of rage brewing in me. Instead, I drove straight to the church community center, where Maylis had scheduled some sort of farewell brunch for Grandpa. I saw the flyer 2 days earlier at the local cafe, her face smiling beside a grainy photo of Gideon, cropped tight to keep the rest of us out. I parked 2 blocks away and walked the rest, keeping my hood up. I was still wearing the same jacket I had worn into the woods. The smell of pine sap and dirt clung to me, and I didn't care. Inside the hall, the air reeked of catered quiche and sweet perfume. Someone had arranged sunflowers in glass vases. Maylis stood near the podium, radiant and rehearsed. She was flanked by Corvina, who wore a subdued black dress and an expression that said she'd rather be anywhere else. People milled around, holding paper cups and murmuring polite nothingness. Most of them didn't know me or didn't recognize me in this state. The ones who did glanced, then looked away. There was a table by the entrance labeled Guest's Family. A teenager behind it handed me a name tag without even looking up. "You're not on the list," she said flatly. I glanced down. The name tag read Lauren. "Close enough," I muttered, sticking it on my chest without correcting her. I didn't sit. I hovered in the back near the exit, watching as Maylis took the microphone. "Thank you all for coming," she began, voice smooth as silk. "Today is about celebrating the man who shaped our lives, a man who believed in family above all else." A slideshow started behind her, flickering with photos from decades past. Grandpa in his military uniform, Grandpa teaching a kid to fish, Jorah, not me, Grandpa sitting at a picnic table surrounded by smiling faces, except something felt off. I stepped closer to the screen. Every single photo that should have had me in it, every memory I knew I was part of, had been edited, cropped, manipulated. In one, where I distinctly remembered standing next to Gideon during a summer barbecue, his hand now rested on empty space. My body was gone, erased, like I'd never been there. A cold numbness spread through my spine. Valora was standing nearby, chatting with some local realtor. I heard her laugh, then glance at the screen and say, "Funny, right?" Like she was never there. She said it like a joke. But it wasn't one. It was deliberate. I left. Not because I couldn't take it, but because I refused to let them see how deep it cut. I drove home with both hands gripping the wheel tighter than necessary. The moment I stepped into my apartment, I headed straight for the closet and pulled down the old guitar case. Grandpa's. The one he never let anyone touch. It had been sitting there for years. I hadn't opened it since he passed. The leather creaked when I unlatched it. Inside was the guitar, dusty but intact. Tucked inside the sound hole was a rolled-up piece of parchment, bound with twine. My hands trembled as I unrolled it. It was his handwriting. To Lena, because she saw me when others only saw a wallet. Underneath was a full, signed and notarized version of his original will. This wasn't the version Thatcher read. This was older, more personal, more real. And attached to it Folded inside was a note. If you found this, it means they tried to erase you. I never would. I sat on the floor and cried, not loud, not messy, just quiet tears that slipped down my face as the weight of everything came crashing down. Not just what they'd done, but how easily they thought they could do it, how easily they had done it, and how close they came to succeeding. I wiped my face, stood up, and got to work. I scanned the will, saved 3 copies, one on my laptop, one on a USB, and one in cloud storage. I printed 2 hard copies, sealed one in an envelope, and addressed it to a lawyer I had met during a zoning dispute last year. He wasn't fancy, but he was honest. And at this point, honesty mattered more than power. I walked to the post office myself. When the envelope slid into the outgoing bin, I felt something loosen inside me, like an old splinter finally working its way out. I wasn't going to scream anymore. I didn't need to. The paper would speak for me, and if Melis wanted to stage another fake memorial, she'd have to do it under oath. You tried to delete me from the story. Now I'm writing the ending myself. The file from the scanner was still warm on my fingertips when I leaned back in the chair, exhaling slow and deep. There was no need to scream. Not anymore. I had every word I needed, typed, signed, and sworn into ink by the only man who ever saw through the mess of this family and still chose to love me. You tried to delete me from the story. Now I'm writing the ending myself. After sealing the envelope to my lawyer, I opened my laptop and pulled up Melis's Instagram. It was almost too easy to find her profile. She never hid when she wanted an audience. There she was, her latest post from the brunch. A polished photo carousel, her hand holding Grandpa's old watch, her face posed just right under a black veil like some movie widow. A group shot of guests smiling under a banner that read, Legacy of Love. Her caption read, Carrying Grandpa's legacy forward, family first, always. I sat there for a second, my jaw tight. Then I clicked screenshot. Another photo followed, this time a clip from her live speech. She stood with a hand on her heart, voice trembling just enough to look sincere. I hit play. He left it all to me, she said, tears welling at the corners of her eyes. But money's not the point. It's the weight of legacy. What you do with what's left behind. Thousands of hearts fluttered across the screen. Comments poured in. She's so strong. Such grace under pressure. Must be hard having a sister like that greedy Lena. I clicked again. Screenshot. Then again. And again. If they wanted a performance, I'd show them what it looked like when the truth walked onto the stage. By mid-morning, I had already gathered my copies. The real will, the binder photos from the cabin, audio from the fake 911 line, and now this, the curated lies meant to polish her public image while she carved me out behind closed doors. Then came the call. Hi, is this Ms. Lena Parks? The voice was clipped, professional. Yes, I answered, already sensing where this was going. This is Aaron Sandoval, Bank of Bozeman. I'm calling regarding the Gideon Parks Trust. There's been a request to update account access, add a co-signer, and change primary signature authority. My heart stopped for a full second. Who submitted the request? I asked, already knowing the answer. There's a document signed by you, naming Melis Parks as the acting beneficiary. That's not my signature, I said flatly. The line went quiet for a beat. Then he cleared his throat. We suspected as much, given the date discrepancy. But we're required to follow up. Do you have legal documentation of your position? I do. I'll fax it now. Ma'am, I'd strongly recommend legal counsel. This isn't just a dispute over funds, it's potential fraud. I thanked him and hung up. My hands were cold, but my focus was razor sharp. Melis wasn't just lying anymore. She was committing fraud. On paper, on camera, in real time. So I called Miranda Sharp. She wasn't the flashiest attorney in Bozeman, but she was sharp in every way her name suggested. We met once at a local fundraiser for historic preservation. She remembered me. Within an hour, I was in her office, documents spread across her desk like the beginning of a battle map. This is more than ugly, she said, flipping through the binder shots. This is premeditated. She read the fake dispatch transcript twice, eyes narrowing. She faked a 911 line? Yes, I confirmed. And tried to forge a power of attorney? I nodded. She sat back, crossed her arms. They played with family. We'll play with law. We filed the paperwork that afternoon: will verification, fraud notification, protective order request. I didn't flinch through any of it. I walked out of Miranda's office and down the courthouse steps just as the wind picked up, lifting the hem of my coat and brushing hair across my cheek. The sky was blue, sharp with light, no clouds in sight, but it felt like a storm was forming. I walked to the car, opened my phone, and went live. Just me, no background music, no filters. "Hi," I said calmly, clearly. "I'm Lena Parks. You may have heard a lot about me this week." I paused, let the silence sit. My sister Malis has been telling the world she inherited everything from our grandfather. That's not true. She didn't. I did. Because he trusted me. Because I took care of him when no one else bothered. Another pause. She staged a photo shoot at his funeral. She hosted a brunch where I wasn't even named. She removed me from family pictures. And now, she tried to steal his accounts using a fake signature. I let that sink in before finishing. I gave them a chance to stay quiet. Now I'll make sure the truth is louder than their lies. The message was sent. No emojis, no caption. Just a photo of the bracelet Malis swore was hers, now back in my hands, where it always belonged. I didn't add a word. I didn't need to. She would know what it meant. She'd feel it before she could even open it. The next morning, I was already halfway through my second cup of coffee when Naomi Ray called. Her voice came through clear, unshaken, with that matter-of-fact tone she'd developed since journalism school in Missoula. "I saw you're live," she said. "Finally." I closed the laptop and leaned back. "You okay?" Naomi chuckled. "I'm not the one who just exposed half of her family on social media. I'm just wondering what took you so long." It had been years since we really talked. Life pulled us in different directions after high school. But some friends don't need rebuilding. They just wait in silence, like a bridge you forgot you built, but somehow still stands. "You always said I had good timing," I told her. She hummed thoughtfully. "Well, you do. And you've also got something else. Momentum. Everyone's talking. But it's still mostly noise. You want signal? I can help with that." "I'm listening." Naomi didn't skip a beat. "I have an old project recording. Remember that audio story we had to do about legacy, junior year?" I blinked. "That was 16 years ago?" "Yep. And guess who your grandfather agreed to be interviewed by? Yours truly." There was a pause on my end. I barely remembered the assignment. Something about the people who shaped our values. I chose Gideon without even thinking twice. "You still have it?" "I do. Just went through my old files. And Lena, it's gold." That afternoon, Naomi came by with her recorder and a folder of transcripts. We sat at my kitchen table while the late morning sun slipped across the floor, warming everything except my heart. She hit play. Grandpa's voice filled the room. Not the version shaped by my grief. The real one. Clear, deliberate, and kind. "I think Lena understands people better than most adults I know," he said in the clip. "She listens. She doesn't take up space to prove she exists. That's rare these days." My throat clenched. "I trust her," he continued, voice steady. "If there's anything I can leave behind, it's not just money or land. It's the right person to carry the story forward. That's Lena." We both sat in silence for a few seconds after it ended. Naomi looked at me, her gaze sharper than it had been when she walked in. "I'm publishing this. Full editorial. I'll add screenshots from Malis's lies, the will, your video. People need to hear your side, but they also need to hear his." And she did. By evening, the story was live. Erased by Blood, When Families Rewrite Legacy with Lies. The title alone drew attention. But it was the content. The voice of a man people respected, paired with undeniable evidence that flipped the narrative. Comments exploded. "Wait, this changes everything. Why didn't we hear from her first? Malis edited her sister out of the memorial slideshow. What kind of person does that? This is abuse, plain and simple." I read them all, not for validation, but to measure the shift. The tide was turning. It wasn't just my word against hers anymore. It was truth versus performance. And then came the bracelet. I found it inside a locked music box from my old closet. It took me nearly an hour of digging and nearly giving up before I spotted it, nestled beneath Grandpa's pocket knife and a faded Polaroid of us fishing. The bracelet gleamed, dull with time, but unmistakable, and there, on the inside curve, was the inscription, "To Lena, the fire I trust most." I had it tested, of course, just to be thorough. The engraving matched Gideon's handwriting from documents dated months before his death. No question, and the bracelet Malis tossed at me in the woods? A cheap knockoff from Etsy. I found the receipt in the binder photos I'd taken, the one labeled Props, Sentimental. She didn't just lie, she choreographed. I uploaded the new evidence to a drive, then emailed it to Miranda, my lawyer, who replied within 15 minutes. This just pushed the fraud case from strong to bulletproof. By Friday, Malis's sponsor deals started dropping. Boutique wine partnerships, a line of minimalist jewelry. She posted a video saying she was stepping back to protect her peace. The comments weren't forgiving. People had questions, and Malis didn't have answers, only rehearsed statements that now felt hollow in the face of facts. That night, the phone rang. Blocked number. I didn't hesitate. "Let's not make this uglier than it already is." Her voice was tight, like she'd rehearsed the line and couldn't believe she had to use it. I said nothing. "I'm serious, Lena. It's hurting Mom. It's hurting us. I'm sure there's a way to—" I hung up. No fury. No screaming. Instead, I texted her one photo. The bracelet. No words. No follow-up. She tried to erase me with edited memories. I responded with something real enough to wear. It wasn't over. But I finally had room to breathe. That thought looped in my mind as I stepped through the courthouse doors, heels clicking against the polished floor with more certainty than I expected from myself. It had been exactly 1 week since I pulled myself off that forest floor, wrists raw, heart numb, and spine, somehow, still intact. I had survived my own family's erasure. Now I was about to reclaim what they tried to bury with good lighting and lies. The courtroom buzzed with the weight of everything unspoken. Small-town faces filled the gallery, some curious, some loyal, some pretending not to stare. I caught sight of Mr. Reinhardt from the hardware store, Mrs. Kessler, who used to bring cherry pies to every school event. Even the town pastor sat in the back row, eyes heavy with whatever prayers he hadn't yet said. And then there was Corvina. She sat near the back, a seat away from everyone, holding her purse with both hands like it was the only thing anchoring her to the room. Her gaze never met mine, but I felt it, heavy, complicated, and still trying to decide whose daughter she wanted to be seen supporting. Malis entered with flair, pressed navy suit, designer heels, not a hair out of place. She looked every bit the influencer caught in a misunderstanding, composed, rehearsed, just a touch of sorrow playing at her lips. She sat with her lawyer, a thin man with a perfectly folded handkerchief who looked more like a divorce mediator than a criminal defense attorney. I wore black, simple, modest, no lipstick, no mascara, just the truth and the weight of a flash drive tucked into my lawyer's hand. Judge Mercer entered, and the room fell silent. He was a tall man with a face that didn't move unless it had to. Word in town was he had once thrown out an entire fraud case because someone tried to hug him after a ruling. "Ms. Parks," he said, glancing down at the case file, "you are presenting claims of financial fraud, document falsification, and attempted harm. Your counsel may proceed." Miranda stood like she'd been waiting her whole career for this moment. Calm, measured, surgical. "Your Honor, we will demonstrate that Ms. Lena Parks was the intended and sole heir of the late Gideon Parks. We will also show that the defendant, Malis Parks, conspired to not only deny Ms. Parks her inheritance, but to endanger her physically and psychologically in doing so." She turned and nodded. The flash drive was inserted into the laptop, screen mirrored to the projector. First slide, a scanned copy of the original will. Gideon's handwriting, notarized, highlighted section. "To Lena, because she saw me, not my bank account." Murmurs from the back row. Second slide, photos from the Legacy Strategy binder. One page showed a full timeline, Dosage amount, rope strength, likelihood of resistance. The juror in the second row flinched. Then the audio, my 911 call, followed by the sickening voice of Malis answering as Montana Dispatch. It played only 10 seconds, but it was enough. Next came the voice recording Naomi provided, Gideon's voice, clear and unwavering, saying, I trust Lena, she's who I'm leaving it to. Everyone else will just try to sell it or spin it. A few jurors nodded slightly. One shook her head, clearly appalled. Then, the bracelet. Miranda handed it to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. The inscription gleamed faintly. To Lena, the fire I trust most. And finally, the comparison photo. Malis's version, purchased online, matched to a receipt found in her own files. By the time Miranda returned to her seat, the room was quiet enough to hear my pulse. Malis's lawyer stood. Your Honor, we believe this to be a deeply emotional family dispute. Misunderstandings have occurred, certainly, but this is not the realm of criminal intent. It's heartbreak, grief, and a difference in interpretation of legacy. Judge Mercer didn't blink. He leaned forward, hands clasped. What I see, he said slowly, is a series of coordinated actions, each one removing this woman from her legal rights, her physical safety, and her family history. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was premeditated isolation with life-threatening intent. He paused, let the words land like stones. Ms. Malis Parks, I hereby sentence you to 20 years in a state correctional facility, with no eligibility for parole for the first 10. The court finds you guilty of attempted fraud, conspiracy to defraud, and endangerment with premeditated malice. Malis stood, disbelief cracking across her perfectly composed face. You stole the family from me, she screamed, the words ripping out like a confession. I didn't move. She tried to break me in the woods. She failed. She tried to erase me from the photos. She failed. She tried to manipulate a legacy that was never hers to touch. And now, finally, she failed for good. As the bailiff escorted her out, she twisted to face me again. You always needed to be the favorite. You couldn't handle not being chosen. I met her gaze. I didn't need to be the favorite, I said quietly. I just needed to be safe. Reporters swarmed the steps outside, but I kept walking. Past them. Past the microphones and cameras. Past the questions. A woman with a notepad caught up to me on the sidewalk. Ms. Parks, do you have a statement? I stopped just once, turned to look at her. Then the crowd. I didn't do this to punish her, I said. I did it to stop pretending it was okay. And I kept walking. It wasn't over. But I finally had room to breathe. Room to breathe didn't mean the air was always clean. It just meant I wasn't choking on it anymore. 6 months had passed since the gavel struck and the courtroom emptied. Since Malis was led away in a navy blazer that couldn't hide the collapse in her spine. Since the headlines stopped using my name with question marks and started using hers with full stops. Life didn't return to normal because there was no normal to go back to. But life moved, and I moved with it. I live now in a cabin outside Bozeman, about 25 minutes from town. Close enough to hear the train whistle at dawn, far enough that no one drops by unannounced. It sits on the edge of the forest Grandpa used to walk through every morning, long before smartphones and live streams taught people to document every second of their grief. The place isn't fancy. 2 rooms, a front porch that leans slightly to the left, and a shop in the back where I work with cedar, oak, and whatever reclaimed wood finds its way to my truck. Some days, I carve intricate leaf patterns into old barn doors. Other days, I just sand and breathe and let my hands stay busy while my mind stays still. Folks around here call me the Cedar Woman or the Lady with the Quiet Eyes. Some know the story, most don't, and that's fine by me. The ones who whisper less now tend to look me in the eye when they say hello at the farmer's market. A few have even apologized, softly, awkwardly, like they're afraid I'll bite. I don't. I just nod. Sometimes that's all it takes. Naomi stops by every couple of weeks, usually on a Friday. She brings local coffee and new gossip and never mentions the article anymore, even though I know it still gets traffic. We sit on the porch and watch the trees sway. We don't talk about Malis, not directly, but sometimes we talk around it. Last time, she handed me an envelope without a word. The return address was Corvina's. I didn't open it. I didn't even bring it inside. I watched it curl in the fire pit that evening, unread, unwelcomed. Some bridges don't burn. They sink slowly, rot from the middle out. And when the last plank gives way, you don't swim back. You build something better on your own side of the river. The shop's doing well. People like the idea of restoration. They bring broken heirlooms, cracked picture frames, pieces of furniture that carry too much memory to throw away. I don't tell them what I know, that sometimes the most healing thing you can do isn't to fix what's broken, but to reshape it into something else entirely. I keep Grandpa's guitar in the corner of the studio. I don't play it. That was never my gift, but I glance at it often. And on days when the shop is quiet and the air smells just right, pine, sawdust, a touch of autumn, I swear I hear the hum of a low note, or maybe just the echo of something I still carry. Last week, the local post office clerk mentioned that Malis had tried to appeal her sentence. It was denied. The public interest faded and her brand disappeared faster than it was built. Influencers need an audience, and the only eyes left on her now are behind concrete and glass. Someone told me she wrote me a letter from prison. Sent it certified. I burned it too. Didn't even break the wax seal. I don't need closure in her words. I've already lived it in mine. Sometimes when I can't sleep, I write anonymously online. Small essays, nothing dramatic, stories about inheritance, but not the financial kind, about legacy, about what people leave behind that can't be signed over. One of them went viral. The title was, "What if the only people you had to forgive were the ones who taught you never to trust?" Thousands of comments followed, some angry, some understanding, a few heartbreaking in their sameness. I didn't respond to any of them, but one caught me off guard. It was short. Just 3 words. I see you. I don't know who sent it. Maybe it doesn't matter. Sometimes that's all we want, to be seen, not in a photo, not through a filter, just seen. And that, I've learned, is its own kind of justice. Sometimes survival isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet, slow, and sacred, and that's enough. Sometimes the deepest betrayals don't come from strangers. They come from the people who shared your dinner table, your childhood, your blood. But survival isn't always loud. It can be quiet, deliberate, and powerful. And telling the truth, even when no one wants to hear it, is its own kind of justice. What about you? Have you ever been erased by someone you loved, or forced to rebuild from the ashes of your own family? Let me know in the comments. And if this story moved you, subscribe to the channel. There are more true, raw, and unforgettable revenge stories waiting for you.